We'll bring the select board meeting to order. Oh, if I remember correctly from the agenda, Rodney was supposed to be first.
Yes.
He called me up and he wasn't feeling good and had a sore throat and a cough, so he decided not to come.
What did he say? Other than
He
that,
said he was sick.
what did he say about the roads?
He got 18-inch culverts for Russell Road. They weren't
Some?
the ones he wanted. They're the next grade down, but he figured better to get them and finish the project than not to get them. And he's getting stone from McCullough's because Tucker's blaster got behind.
Yep.
So they haven't got any stone, but McCullough started crushing again, so he's gonna get the stone to finish that project at McCullough's. And they were up there today, cleaning and ditching and getting ready to drop the culverts in.
Matt Loftus doing that work?
I did not ask him. He had a problem with the Challenger tractor the other day. He called me up. Anyways, I think they got it figured out. So
What's the problem?
it wouldn't shift. And apparently there was a couple grease fittings down under that nobody knew where they were.
Oh.
And they got them going, and anyways, now it's shifting. So they started leaf blowing today in front of the grader.
Oh, yep.
Wherever the grader is going. And maybe by the end of the week, we'll have the new little truck.
Oh, nice.
Getting there done. And that is that.
Well, it's pretty simple.
That is simple. They have not. Okay, I didn't think to ask them about that. Can I use this pen?
Yes, there.
You know if he's still having trouble, well, they don't have any gravel or stuff from Tucker's, but what's the story there?
Tucker's is crushing this week.
Oh.
So hopefully by the end of the week or first of next week, we'll have it.
Mhm.
He wanted to wait until he got a pile ahead. Now he's scooping it right out from under him. So he talked to Sherry yesterday, I believe. And so he probably start hauling it away first.
Is he gonna get Don Smith or someone to?
I'll say that, but I just assume.
Oh, I'm trying to think of all the things that we normally talking about. Right.
Well,
Did you ever talk to Rowan about the fill for Kevin Rogers one?
Yeah. At least.
That was some Ray Sherman, his woodlot.
No, I didn't remember that. I thought of it today, but I haven't done it yet. Over by Mike's house was apparently a cutout put in by the road crew at some point. Now Faye's not upset, but he wants some resolution to why he can't get into his woodlot. So I will call him. I'll put it on my little list of things for him. There. Anything else that we've overlooked?
Just those two.
All right, what's next on the agenda?
Megan with Vista.
Road stuff,
Oh, yeah,
Morrill Road. I just got the atlas for this year where it's, and I'm meant to review it and make any corrections or updates. And if we want to address that, then I would submit that as part of the Master Street addressing guide and submit a name change if that's desired.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, it seems like a good resolution to the potential problem with 911 calls or whatever.
And we'll work on that then.
And you said Jola was okay with that. She was.
Yeah. I will check with her. She's the only one that gets mail there.
Now back to.
So Megan with Vista was going to come on and introduce herself on Zoom, but I'm not sure if she's on yet or not. I don't see her name.
What's CPF?
I don't know.
It's an acronym for something.
Yeah. Do you want to see if she comes on later?
Yeah, why don't we just?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And then we were going to have the discussion of the ATV, UTV use on select roads with Ian McKenzie. There he is.
Oh, there's Ian. Step forward, please.
Get him up. Yeah, right.
Yeah, do you want to, you can come up and sit with me up here if you want.
Hey guys.
Hey.
So pretty much I just was, trying to get caught up with, what you guys had going on in town with Trails Committee. I don't want to have, necessarily anything to do with that, but I just realized as we were working on stuff in Royalton, it was probably a really good time to make sure that you guys, were in the loop and intended to, connect with you guys. What we do have is a small group in South Royalton that we, started trying to get a VASA affiliated club. Because primarily, there's quite a few of us residents that have these machines, and we ride lots of other places in the state, and we're thinking there was potentially an opportunity to interconnect with two other networks, one being our neighbors to Verchier Fairleigh, and then in Royalton we're working on connecting through Barnard to that network that goes through Stockbridge and that whole general area. So I mean, we're right in the infancy of it, just trying to get it established and talked about. I met with the Selectboard of Royalton. They told me to go meet with the Planning Commission and the Conservation Commission, which I have gotten some of their initial points of view. And so right now we're looking at, say, a handful of 5 or 6 roads basically. In Royalton, we want to try to get from the southeast end of town, being somewhere in the Button Hill area, be able to use 110 to cross the river, Mill Road, get up through Gee Hill, over to Royalton Village, utilize the Automera Road, Oxbow, come down to town just to Worthy Burger and the crossroads, nothing in town, and then just back out to Barnard, whether it's, right now we're just asking for Bradbrook Road, but, and then anyways, just giving you that big picture, we're trying to work on a bunch of different private landowners, in between all those roads. And that way we can limit the amount of trails usage actually on the town highways. I haven't done a ton of research in Tunbridge yet on all, any potential landowners that we could, possibly, circumnavigate the town highways. But, other than that, we know that the Verchier Club is working with the town of Chelsea. I guess they've also established a ATV committee. That's kind of the direction that Williamstown did when they did their recent ordinance, was they established their own town committee. Right now, the initial indications I've gotten from Royalton that they wouldn't necessarily look for us to do a separate town affiliated committee, but understanding that we would have this VASA affiliated club. All that being said, basically just want to have an open conversation that, we're more or less just trying to think of the corridor that goes, say from Button Hill up through you know, like Kibling, Taylor, what Morrill, Moody, maybe access some of the pavement on, you know, Stratford Road to Brocklebank, and then from there we're in Chelsea. I didn't necessarily, you know, change a lot of my stats and stuff. I have a whole printout agenda, but I could, you know, just figured that'd be better just for tonight, just come open up dialogue with you guys. You know, there's all sorts of complaints, and we're certainly, you know, potential pro or cons, that is, of having this kind of usage available. You know, dust, noise, speed. You know, basically, you know, try to keep it, you know, bridge, because I guess I have a lot of other stuff to discuss later. But with the way it works in a lot of the other parts of the state, you know, these machines are, you know, reduced speed limits, you know, usually 20 miles an hour. You know, kind of asking for this on a trial ordinance, you know, trial potential. You know, we can discuss through that. There's things other clubs have done, like the city of Newport, kind of try to lean on them as a model when they get their trial ordinance. If there's, you know, additional random patrols, whether it be by local sheriffs or whatever, that's something that we would be, you know, willing to, you know, put forth the budget towards that, to help satisfy and make sure that, you know, the speed is taken care of, keep dust down, you know, noise. It's no different than any other vehicle. We know the complaints that are going to come. I mean, I live on 110. There's certain people that I know when I can tell their motorcycle when they hit 110 from Route 14 a mile and a half away. The idea is that there are certain ways that the officers can test for decibels, and or if people have modified their exhaust to make sure that, you know, it's not exceeded the manufacturer's intended ranges. And as for erosion, there's a lot of stuff that we have to do with going to certain courses, so that anywhere that, you know, if we were to establish trails, you know, not on, you know, town highway, or even if it is on a class 4, if there was a situation that we all looked at it and said, hey, you know, we think we've got a point of, you know, concentrated flow right here. Hey, you guys as a club using this, do you think you could help us out? And absolutely, we'd be more than happy to help out with whether it's whatever the solution was, that water bars or culverts or, you know, stay pack, you know, whatever the solution is. And you know, certainly welcome to walk and look at any of that there. We've got club members have also, you know, we've also already figured on having to get like a mini York rake, and just like what the snowmobile clubs do is every week they go out and groom. If there was a particular corner or something, that intersection that, you know, we all had concerns about, we'd be happy to, you know, York rake it weekly, or, you know, at any given point. And trying to be able to enhance the community. I mean, the reason why, whether it's, you know, legal trails or mountain bike trails, hiking trails, or, you know, ATV use, I mean, we're all Vermonters, we all love to be outside. That's why we're here. You know, we love the outdoors, and whether, I think that there's ways that we can, you know, work with it and keep the conservation in mind. And then also, you know, try to give more community type feels. We just went to a poker ride in Washington and had a great experience with a community I hadn't even ridden with before, but, you know, went up there, had a pig roast. They were, you know, everyone was real nice. We went to all these different spots, and it was a real nice community event that they had. And, you know, same thing, I've already told the Royalton Select Board that we'd be more than happy to do, you know, like Chelsea does like a road rally thing. We're not looking to plan on that, but we'd do like our own thing. And I'm foreseeing it as we wouldn't even charge a fee. Like, I just want to get people out in the woods and make them, you know, stop at farm stands or something and have to, you know, purchase a trinket and bring that back to acquire their points, or, you know, do some sort of event like that that gets, you know, keeps people out on the back roads. And the other thing is, with having a club and available trails to use, a lot of people, you know, usually talk about illegal use or trespassing, and it's one of those things that, you know, in talking to Loretta, she sat in at the Royalton Select Board meeting, and, you know, when they asked her what her initial thoughts were, her first sentence was, you know, people are going to ride on them what with ATVs or UTVs, whether there's an ordinance or not. And it's just, if we can establish an ordinance that we put forth, you know, different infractions and fines, then it gives her potentially a little more teeth. And also, you know, maybe if we lay out places where people can ride legally, then it's going to keep people from those other places that, you know, they're not out bushwhacking or boondocking, you know, in places they really shouldn't be. And so then the same thing goes with, if we have a club, we could potentially have, you know, youth safety, you know, certification courses where that, you know, it's no different than hunter safety, where you're trying to instill good ethics in your riders and in your youth, and, you know, try to make it more of a generational thing that they can take their kids and, you know, give them those opportunities. It's same thing when South Royalton used to have an ordinance, but we lost it, because I remember as a kid, you know, as a kid, but, you know, 99, 2000, old homes days, we had an ordinance and people were blasting around the green during old homes days, and that was the end of it right there for us. Is, you know, when you have something like that and people just don't, you know, appreciate it or respect it or understand it, then they abuse it, and we lose it. So I mean, it's one of those things that we have this group that's looking to put forth a lot of work, and we understand it's going to be an uphill challenge. There's going to be a lot of people that would be real upset about it, and just want to have an open conversation. And, you know, anyways, just wanted to say hi to you guys and let you know that we wanted to connect, and before some things got way far down the road and it was all written off and there was no way to open the door back up.
Do you know how many towns in the state allow this type of thing now?
That's a great question. I don't have that exact one. One of the stats
for quite a while.
there's like, if I were to say number of towns, I would guess you're in the 40s range. So the ones that I did get from VASA, so when our group first started meeting, we evaluated all sorts of different things. What kind of group do we want to be? Do we want to be just four-wheelers? Do we want to be, you know, inclusive of dirt bikes and everybody? And so we had a lot of different discussion, and we came back around to, we really need to be a VASA affiliated club, because they have existing Vermont state statutes that give them, you know, the ability to use the roads legally. Because technically a class 4 road, I mean, I'm sure the lawyers have lots of fun with it. Could an ATV actually run on it? Can it not? If you don't have the ordinance, basically you shouldn't be on the class 4 road. So with VASA, it helps establish that. They also have a memorandum of understanding with VTrans. So the ones that I do have is, there's 28 different pieces of state highway that are used in 18 different towns alone. So like, you know, and that was an important stat for me to, you know, that the Royalton Select Board asked me, because there's a small section of 110 I'm looking for, and a small section of 14 we're looking for as of right now. Because I mean, it's not like the snowmobiles where, you know, you guys do, you know, all your crossings at 90-degree, you know, intersections for the most part. So if any part of the road you're going to share it, you have to have that. So there's, you know, I don't know how much you guys are familiar with, like, say, either Topsom or Berkshire, but there's,
We have to approve every year a short piece of the class 3 road
yeah,
For some of us.
for pass.
yeah. So it's, and that's the other thing is that, and, you know, I could produce a sample ordinance. I already got one, kind of basically, you know, took Williamstown, butchered it, dressed it up, and added actually, you know, some additional enforcement, you know, things to it. And would be more than welcome to, you know, if it is a trial thing, or, you know, and every year, let's, you know, sit down. They did it so the first select board meeting of the year, as long as, you know, you don't have too much other business, let's sit down and review it, what's working, what's not working. And it's not like, you know.
Ian, what's the definition, or does either VASA or the state or your club have a definition of what's an ATV and what's a UTV?
Maybe not what's the difference necessarily, but I mean, an ATV is traditionally your sit on drive with handlebars. UTV, you know, it's traditionally now it's like a side by side where you've got 2 seats, a steering wheel. Usually, and for registration purposes and all this stuff, it's typically a machine that's less than 2,000 pounds. That's the major you know, the major one that, you know, kind of limits it because, you know, you get over that, you're really more into a regular motor vehicle and subject to those kinds of, you know, motor vehicle laws.
And does VASA allow, you know, motorized dirt bikes?
No,
They
so
don't.
technically, like if it's a VASA club trail only, it's not dirt bike allowed. I guess, you know, it's just one of their things. They, you know, they're keep it nice and close to their chest. And the dirt bikes, it's a tough one because those guys, they have more ability to travel different terrain and have a different registration. So it's a tough thing for ATVers where we pay. There's one of the other stats I was like, there's 16,000 registered ATVs in the state of Vermont. And so we pay a lot of fees and registration, and we can't even ride in the towns we reside in many cases.
What's, just out of curiosity, what's the fee you pay?
Uh,
Dollar-wise?
well, I'd have to double check. I think it's 35, or I don't know if it's changed recently. The registrations have been,
16,000 probably.
it is. I mean, and so when we start going back to fees, not to get too far off track, but it's one of those things where I was just reading like a blue collar coalition thing that they do a lot of, try to work with BLMs and Bureau of Land Management. And they're just on fuel alone. Like if you did all the studies they've done for the amount of fuel that's, you know, purchased for the direct use in off-highway vehicles, the taxes, because gasoline isn't, you know, off highway, on highway, the taxes that are accrued by the federal government, they've estimated like 282 million a year. But really in the federal government picture, only 84 million of that goes back to actual off-highway, you know, programs. And really most of that's all out west for, you know, you're talking all the big roads they have in Colorado and Utah, California. So it's, anyways, but that's like, I think that's like a really good, like if you think of those numbers, same thing, like we pay tons of money in registration fees and we don't see, VASA doesn't see a penny of the ATV registration money back out. So VASA, as a club member, you would also, you would pay in $60 additionally on top of your registration. 40 of that goes to VASA. The club, you know, applies for a grant to do any trail maintenance or trail construction improvements. And then $20 of that $60 goes directly to the club for, you know, local, so that way that club can, you know, manage that money directly locally, and whether it's, you know, grooming or culverts or signage and erosion control materials. So I mean,
So like VAS, are you also required to have insurance?
we're required to have insurance. Yes, that's a good one. So like again, what the city of Newport does is, like with VAS, when you sign off on the landowner permission, the VASA has basically the exact same form, but what say the city of Newport did is they signed on to that, so it effectively adds them, the city of Newport, on as a additionally insured. So that covers, like, I think it's $1 million in liability, property damage type thing. So I mean, I think ideally in any sort of situation, even if you weren't fully, if you didn't have that piece of paper there, you probably would still be able to make claims if something, you know, really bad happened. But it's better to have the paper ahead of time than not. And the same thing I had showed to the Royalton Select Board, that that'd be a practice that I'd recommend.
So what do you get for your state registration? Like you're not really
Nothing.
allowed to ride on any
Nothing.
roads. You can't ride in state parks.
Technically,
forests.
No state parks, no state forests. Technically, the only thing that if your town doesn't have a ordinance for use, about the only thing you can really do with your ATV, UTV registration is ride on a frozen body of water, because a frozen body of water becomes a public highway. So if you really get into the nitty gritty of the law, I mean, I'm not a
Or
lawyer,
your own
but
land.
yeah, or yeah, of course, your own. But you don't have to. Why you don't have to pay a registration fee to ride your own land in Vermont? Massachusetts, you do have to actually pay for a registration for an off-highway vehicle, technically, to ride on lands in Massachusetts. So when we go to, friends of ours take like their buggies and stuff down there, they have to have separate tags for that.
Huh.
So,
But more or less, it's a model like Bass and Tri-Town Travelers is your model.
yeah, and so it's really tough to find exact, financial, economic, impacts, even from like Northern New Hampshire. They have a completely different situation, but the last, of course, now with the Corona crisis, last good article I was able to find in the Argus was one of the tourism folks had quoted that I think the number was high, but they were in the Argus is quoted saying that it's a $2.5 billion a year for snowmobiles. That's the economic impact that snowmobiles bring. And I mean, they have a pretty short season, and the only thing is, so the difference with Vast is you have 5,000 miles of Vast in the state. Right now we have about 1,200 miles of VASA trails in the state. And I think there's all sorts of pluses and minuses, but even if you could say that, all right, if they're 2.5 billion, I'd be willing to bet that, VASA has got to be pretty close to the same economic impact to the state, because we have a longer ride season, more expensive vehicles. And I mean, it's nothing for our group to go and, we'll, Airbnb or stay, whether it's in Concord, Island Pond, or, and spend, $500 to $600 a weekend easy. Yeah. And, plus then you figure machines and service, and there all the rubrics that go along with that. But anyways, it's a major, part of, if you want to look at that industry, the money that's circulating in that. And I mean, Vermont, we don't have a ton of industry, so it's not trying to say it's a good push for it, but it's one of those things that it's, I don't know what we'd expect to see. Are we expecting to see, maybe 30 people or 40 people a weekend maybe drive through town more than usual? But I think for where we're at in Royalton, if and I was talking to Scott and Jason at Crossroads and Worthyburger, they're like, we'd be more than happy to put a sign out, say ATVs welcome. And I don't even care if they don't frequent our store, walk across the train tracks and go visit Daisy. They know that 90% of the people that come down to either one of those parking lots, they're going to go in and frequent there. So we're working on it so we can get to there, get all around town, get to Village Pizza, try to be a connector to the Versier Club, so that way people have a good something that's worthwhile doing. I think that there's potential if we do it right, and make sure to keep all the bad eggs from abusing it. We could have something that's successful.
Mariah's predecessor was a big fan. Jackie Higgins.
Yeah.
Used to go up to Gorham and Berlin and places like that.
Oh yeah.
Where was that mountain she went up on?
There's,
There's some mountain that they had like 10,000 ATVs on it. One
Maine.
Somewhere up that way, far away.
Yeah, near Arrowhead.
No, it's obviously we don't have the infrastructure to support something like that, and we wouldn't be pushing for something like that, but that is a good indicator. I mean, there's a lot in the sport. That area is dealing with a lot of grief where you got some residents that really aren't fans of it, and I don't blame them. I mean, it's not that I wouldn't be insensitive to their concerns, or if you had 400 rigs go by your house every weekend, I could understand that would get tiresome, and it's unfortunate for whether they bought beforehand or after, or a lot of those places right now, though, the real estate is going back up in Berlin because, I mean, either that or people are making tons of money on Airbnb. Like for the event that's coming up, a bunch of us are going. They have a big they're calling it their zombie poker ride, and they put up tons of jack-o'-lanterns on one of their bridges, and we can't find a hotel or Airbnb within the 4-town radius. And I know it's one of those things, like, I get it. I'm sympathetic to the people that, obviously I don't want to kick you out of your house and weekend you want to enjoy it. That's not what I'm trying to say, but I'm just saying there's some people are finding a lot of economic benefit to, having that home there or renting it out, or, what it's doing to, keep it from having a stale economy in that town.
Should Ian send his ordinance to us?
Yes, yep, I'm just gonna say that.
Oh, yeah, I think I sent you guys some links of like what I sent
Oh, yeah,
to,
probably.
or you want,
Could you send
I
the
can,
ordinance?
yeah, I'll resend the, right now, the whole written up thing that I have is more geared toward Royalton, and I'll, probably write a new one to, follow the model of what we're,
Okay.
talking about, which roads are ones that were, our focus.
It'll
And,
just help us get more information and
yep,
You see it as a combination of using, everything, class 1, 2, 3, 4, plus private trails on private land.
right. So the reality of the reason why we're just asking right now is to go that route, as kind of, it's all class 2s. I don't even know if there isn't. It's all class 3, 4. So if we were going Button Hill, to Kibling, to Taylor, to, I think it's Hoyt Hill, Morrill, Moody. Well, maybe Stratford would be class 2.
Stratford Road. Yeah.
Stratford's class 2.
Yep.
And then up into Brocklebank, that would be back in class 3, 4s.
Yep.
But that's the general route, just to be able to connect up into first year's trails. And I would be more than, sorry. So the reason, if we can't get any permission to use any of the trails, then it doesn't really make much sense for us to go and pursue the private landowners in that area. If we knew that we could get some sort of trial ordinance, our target is 50% private trails in Royalton. So if we can knock down the amount that we're on the private, on the public highways, then that's our goal. And because I don't want to just ride roads either. I want to, once we get established to have some town highway use, we know we can connect everything, then we might be able to say, okay, here's a sizable tract of land, or here's 2 or 3 landowners in a row that we know that are, potential shareholders with what we're doing. And, we could try to figure out a trail that works on their land and, avoid all the wetlands and, sensitive areas, and make it so that, it's not just a whole bunch of people going by, any one particular point that we want to avoid. We're pretty much figuring that, just getting all the steps and all the parts and pieces in order.
Yep.
Realistically targeting town meeting day, because we understand it's going to be something that's going to be on the floor.
Yep.
Discussion, public vote. I have a few Tunbridge residents that are in our group that I'm sure I'll have to be at Royalton town meeting days, or if they're same time, same deal, I'll have to prioritize Royalton, and whether Josh Benson or some others have to come up here and be the voice, that'll be the game plan.
Any more questions?
No.
Any questions from the audience?
Just put everybody to sleep.
All right, we'll keep in touch.
Yeah, thank you guys very much. Just,
And let us know what's going on in Royalton too.
yeah, yep, will do. All right.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Ian.
Thank you.
I do see Megan is on now.
All right.
Can you hear us, Megan?
Yep, I'm good.
I think you're muted.
Ooh, no.
Or maybe, hold on, maybe I just need to turn it up.
I
That
could
might help
hear
you. Yep, I was muted. Okay.
Okay. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, well, hello. Yeah, my name is Megan and I'm your new 4-town coalition coordinator, which was, made possible by the efforts of your towns and GMADC and AmeriCorps. So I just wanted to introduce myself and kind of give you an update of what I've been doing over the last 6 weeks and what I hope to continue doing. I'm originally from Florida, and I worked as a community organizer there. I've also worked in Albany, New York for the state legislature, as well as in Boston on the Rose Kennedy Greenway. And I just recently finished grad school at the University of Virginia in urban planning. And I'm a huge fan of New England, and I'm really loving the fall. And I've really enjoyed my first 6 weeks here. And so my role is really to continue the momentum that was generated by the original volunteer effort. So to support the working landscape, community development, and affordable housing efforts. And the first thing that I'm working on is recentering past priorities. So seeing if the priorities your town's identified in the original community visits with VCRD back in 2019, seeing if those still stand. So Working Lands has been the most successful committee. The community garden that Meg and a few others run, the White River Land Collaborative and the Trails subcommittees have done really great work. And that's like just, a few volunteers putting in a lot of time. And then housing and economic development have sort of like stagnated, and then economic development actually intentionally dissolved. So one thing I'm working on now is kind of testing to see if there's any desire to bring back a housing discussion and an economic development discussion. If there is, then I'm going to spearhead that effort. And then my ongoing work is to create an efficient structure for the coalition, which I'm doing through research, looking at case studies, talking with VCRD and so on. So currently I'm in an outreach stage. So I'm trying to attend all the select board meetings. This is my third, and as many one-on-one meetings with community members as I can. So one thing I do want to flag is that we have a coalition meeting on October 7th, which is next Thursday at 6 p.m. And I would love if at least one select board member could participate in that event. And I don't have business cards yet, which wouldn't help anyway since I'm on Zoom. But my email is megan@gmedc.com if anyone needs to reach me. I know Mariah has it. And then finally, I would love to hear any thoughts, ideas, concerns, or needs that you have as a select board and as a town.
I'm busy, right? I wasn't paying attention. What did you say?
If you have any needs, concerns, ideas.
Up to you, John.
How long is your term, Megan?
I finish August 15th next year, 2022.
Okay, so we got to work pretty fast. Or would you potentially re-up to do more follow-up work?
Sorry?
Would you re-up and do another year, or like can you
So
imagine?
what the original proposal said was a 3-year AmeriCorps program or position. So in theory, I could get groundwork going, and then you could continue to apply for other AmeriCorps service members to continue the momentum. And then part of my job is also to look at grants and funding opportunities to see if there's any ability to have part-time or full-time staff.
I don't know. I think we'll look over what you've started, and
Sure.
should have you into our next meeting just because we have this big legal trails agenda tonight. So
I'm aware.
yeah. So then I could come up with a whole bunch of questions.
All right.
And I can follow back up now if there's nothing now,
When's our next meeting?
It will be the
Oh, we're the
12th.
same exact time as Royalton too, so that's tricky for you.
October
Okay.
the 12th.
Okay. I know I'm gonna be at a conference then, I think. But email also works. I can also come out one-on-one if that's easier.
I can just work with her back and forth to get a date
Okay.
to get her out here. I'll email you, Megan, and we can figure out a date that will work.
Okay, that sounds good. Well, yeah, if y'all don't have any questions now, then that was easy. I'm done.
Well, thank you for coming and introducing yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Nice
Could
to-
I hear the 3 of your names just so I get a feel?
I'm John O'Brien.
Okay.
Gary Mullen,
Mike McPetrus.
What was the last one?
Mike McPetrus.
Oh, okay, great. Awesome. Nice to virtually meet you.
And can I add one thing? I came to this meeting to just support Megan as I'm on the steering committee for the Four Town Coalition. And I just want to, I'm not sure if everyone heard that Megan did invite you all to, we have a Four Town Coalition meeting on October 7th. Megan said that, but we would love to get a select board member from each of the 4 town select boards at that meeting. So if any of you can make it to that meeting on October 7th, that would be a really great way to get caught up to speed with what we're doing with the coalition.
And where's that meeting?
Virtual.
It'll be on Zoom.
Oh, okay.
And I believe all the select board, at least all the town clerks, I think get the emails.
I
But
can make sure of that tomorrow.
okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay,
Yeah, so if nothing else, then thank you for having me. Nice to meet you.
thank you, Megan.
Yep, again, we'll see you soon.
Bye.
Trails Committee.
Trails Committee, all right.
I think Laura.
Need Darth Vader's theme music.
Yeah.
You could have done that.
And then in all your packets, there's what Laura, your weekly select board packet.
Not just a sketch
Yeah.
pad.
There's
Wow.
the recommendation that Laura's gonna talk about right now, and then some letters and emails that I've received in the last few days regarding it.
All right. I did
Hello.
read it. I read the email, so,
Thank you.
all right, here it is. So I guess you can make your presentation or whatever you want to call it.
So I don't know how it would be best to approach. I'm happy to read this because it's not very long so that everybody present can hear it. It's been posted for a few days. And Rudy and Brenda sent paper copies to some of the landowners or abutting landowners who may or may not access it on the internet. So we felt like it went out pretty broadly, but I'm happy to read it if that would
Yeah, go
work.
ahead.
So everybody, okay. So this is what it says. Based on the work of the Trails Committee, Planning Commission, and agreed upon outcomes from the 9/1/21 and 9/8/21 joint meeting between those two groups and the public, and public meeting on 9/22/21, the following draft recommendations regarding legal trails are offered to the select board. Regarding all 4 trails, language should be a policy and not an ordinance. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to explain as we go or at the end. Trails are for recreational, non-motorized access, except in the cases where legal trails intersect the vast trails for winter use. You have a note there because, John, as you probably recall, the state has e-bike regulations that allow you to be more specific regarding bicycles. We felt that was something that we didn't want to decide on. Given the current trail circumstance, lack of signage and maintenance has led to users leaving the trail and going onto private property. This trail is closed until maintenance can occur, paired with clear signage. Maintenance will require coordination with the State District Wetlands Ecologist to plan for and receive permission for the wetlands crossing at the low point of the trail. Maintenance may be performed by volunteer groups once a plan and any necessary permitting is in place to be confirmed by the Select Board. Finally, Orchard Road, until this trail can be reviewed by the State District Wetlands Ecologist, is open only to pedestrian use when the ground is frozen. After review, a plan will be developed for use of this trail. So this is not a policy recommendation to you, as, I mean, it could be. We didn't word it as a formal policy because we felt like it may need some additional interpretation, or you may want to change it based on your interpretation of it. We felt like, and what conversations have led to, is that we were able to get to the starting point for understanding future trails use. I don't think anybody could have foreseen the increase in trails usage that has happened over the past 2 years, nor when these trails were laid out, could we have foreseen the impact of trail finding apps or social media telling people to go one way over another way, which in the past, when these trails were primarily used by townspeople, it was a little bit different because you may see somebody on the trail and you know them from being in town. Now, because the trails have been used more and people like riding them, they're getting used more by people that don't live here, which is making some landowners uncomfortable. They don't have the same community ethic, perhaps, as other people. And we've heard from landowners that people wait in their dooryards while they're waiting for their groups. They park and they block the road because they don't know there's farm equipment that needs to go by. They go off the trail and trespass on a private property, even though to us it may be clearly marked, but it may not be clearly marked to others. And so we also understand that 3 of the 4 trails, so every trail except for Falls Hill, has clear wetlands issues. And we cannot, at this point, justify increased usage until we have a proper plan in place, knowing the critical importance of the wetlands, both to this community, the landowners, the environment, and to the state, which is why the trails that have wetlands are specifically called out, that they need to be reviewed. We did walk, and I think I said this last time I visited with you, the crossroad with the wetlands ecologist from the state, who did give us a lot of great information to work on. And this document is meant to say where we want to go. And so we don't anticipate this, nor should this be read as the permanent interpretation of how trails should be used until we can address the current circumstance, which is that the trails have not been maintained in the recent past, except for Falls Hill, if ever. They have wetlands issues and none of them have signage. So they may have a sign at the beginning of the trail where people know about them, but they don't have trail signs. So like when you're walking the Appalachian Trail or the Long Trail, there's blazes that keep you on the path. We don't have a way to communicate the right path for people to go on, so they're going on the easy path, which is not the right way. So until those things can be addressed, we feel like limiting access to user groups, primarily pedestrian, as you heard, is the way to balance the needs of the community, the environment, and the trail users until we have the time, capacity, and proper professional input to develop uses for the trails that can take us into the future. Because the last thing we want to do is damage the trails farther and put ourselves even farther behind as far as maintenance goes or ecological issues. As you know, this has been a challenging process, and there are a lot of emotions around it, which I understand, and we are trying to walk the fine line between doing what's right for the community and doing what's right for the landowners. And that is where we are at now. And feel like this process has been long running and extensive and thorough to the point that we can take it now to present to you the path forward, particularly with winter coming. Can't really do much trail maintenance in the winter. So it gives us a nice point to kind of take a breather, regroup, get plans ready for spring, and then launch back into either trail maintenance or permitting or signage in the springtime.
Why did you recommend a policy versus an ordinance specifically?
The challenge of enforcement is a major one. So with an ordinance, as you know, there are civil fines for it. You have to have somebody that can enforce those. And unless we have somebody that can identify and apprehend the people who are misusing the trails, it makes it a more challenging situation. I think a policy, because of the challenge of enforcement, a policy may give us the same outcome in the end as an ordinance. Other towns do have ordinances. Pomfret has one regarding motorized use. But again, if we have an ordinance, we need to understand who and how we're going to enforce it as a town. Do the landowners get the opportunity to apprehend people who are misusing the trails and bring them to you or to whomever for a fine, for a civil fine? Or is it a circumstance where, people put up trail cameras and take pictures of the people? So it's sort of, I think the trust of the community is that the policy would work. And then if we continue to have bad actors, then you could take it to an ordinance.
Or is there or could you create maybe a slightly annotated version of what you addressed here? I mean, it'd be interesting to know on your bullet points sort of how you arrived at these points, just like you explained right now.
Mhm.
On policy versus ordinance. That would be really interesting, I think, for us, because you've been through so much, just to sort of see what your thinking was to get to that point.
Mhm. Would you want that from my perspective or the perspective of the trails and the trails committee and the planning commission?
Well, for example, what you were just telling us now, is that your opinion, or is that sort of a consensus of planning commission and trails committee?
That is because we had this discussion about whether it should be a policy or an ordinance. It's fresh in my mind, the conversations. So some of it is based on state law, the difference and what different towns have done and what we understand to be the challenges because of the isolated nature of some of the trails, that makes enforcement hard. So that's where that comes from. It's my rewording of it, so it's not like the actual language from other places, although we do have language from the other towns available. I'm happy to annotate it. What I get concerned about is that every time we talk about this, it's hours of conversation and many, many email exchanges. So maybe what I can do is put together more of like a reference of all of the documents we've already compiled, so that then we don't have to vote on it again to come back to you. And that would expedite the process to just use what we already have.
Yeah, anything like that would be helpful.
Okay, yeah, I can put that together.
And, just because to me, it brings up a lot of questions, like, and I'm sure you went over this, but where does the Department of Environmental Conservation sort of clash with rights of way in towns, whether it's legal trails or class 4, or even class 3 roads? I mean, at some point, does the agency of transportation have jurisdiction, or is it all wetlands end up with DEC having jurisdiction?
Rudy probably has a lot more useful information about that than I do. Our understanding is that because the trail appears on the town legal highways map, it's a legal right of way for the town.
There's a pit in my olive.
In different ways, the class 1, 2, and 3 roads and class 4 roads, which is why we developed the class 4 road policy that we delivered to you a couple months ago. The concern with trails is that if they are maintained to the extent that they would be, and there's a wetland involved, that's where the permitting issue comes in. If there's work done to culverts for trails maintenance purposes, again, that's a water quality issue, and that's when the wetlands ecologist comes in and reviews and gives permits to it. So depending on, as an example, the crossroad, the kind of plan that we put together for maintenance and upkeep of that trail in that one particular spot, there's a square footage allowance of work you can do on the entire trail before the permitting process comes in, and the type of work you do also impacts that. So again, Rudy probably has a lot more of the specific information, but the main concern with trails is water, and how you cross verified class 2 or class 3 wetlands, or the maintenance that would impact the water flow or water quality off that trail.
But generally, maintenance or upgrading is the trigger. Like if we didn't do anything for any of these, it wouldn't really be an issue.
As far as permitting goes,
Right.
no. So if we do nothing, then there's no permitting required. And they can be open for use. So until you put a regulation in, which this has come up before, and Paul Gillies says that use of trails is permitted until the select board restrains that. So right now, any use of the trail is permitted after your votes, which I was unclear. And I think there are some other people who thought it maybe ended in July, but maybe got extended regarding walking, bikes, and horses. So until you voted on that, the trails could be used for any modes of transportation, motorized or non. Now we're at the point where it's non-motorized, because I believe you voted on that, and it's also in our recommendation. And then the boundaries. But if you don't maintain it, then there's no trigger of water quality standards from just by merely using it. But if you maintain it and you impact the water, or it goes through a wetland, then you trigger a potential permit process.
But if we restrain certain access to it, that doesn't trigger anything.
It's just when you start to maintain it, when you do work on the trail.
And then I was wondering also, just because it came up here, what access do landowners have on their legal trails? For example, if Orchard Trail was pedestrian only in winter, can I walk on it to get to a piece of my property in summer?
Yeah, so landowners get special dispensation, I would say, because the trails are their property. It's like a rite of passage that the public maintains. So the example is Falls Hill. So Cal Hemingway had that land logged. The logger used the trail, which they're allowed to do, to access his property. So if I'm trying to think of, so like on the crossroad, if Priscilla wanted to log and they needed access from behind the barn down the road, she could have somebody come down the trail. If there's a wetland, again, they would need a permit, or they would need the proper, like loggers have to use those special skidder bridges when they're crossing. So there's special things that happen when there's water crossings. But the landowner does maintain that right of access, even if there's restrictions put in.
And that would be true, say, like snow machining, if I wanted to snow machine or ride horses through the wetland on Orchard Trail, that was our property.
I'm not going to answer that question because I don't think I'm going to say the right thing, but I think that's a good question that we could ask Paul.
And also, I wondered what defines an event?
That's a good question. And we tried to answer that. Our class 4 road policy recommendation, we defined an event. The Trails Committee and Planning Commission jointly declined defining an event. For how I personally, and I believe how it's indicated in the class 4 road policy, which if my computer wakes up, I can read to you. We at the Planning Commission level defined it as something that you pay to attend, or that is organized in conjunction with another event. So this is what we said. Recreational events, because the class 4 roads, we say use of class 4 roads for organized events. Class 4 roads may be used for recreational events with the following guidelines. Recreational events are those in which the participants pay a fee to enter, or they are participating as a direct result of a separate organized event. So if we had, in the example we gave here was the Green Mountain Horse Show, or it could be the Icelandic Horse Show that happens at the fairgrounds. If a group of riders from that event said, we want to go on a trail ride, they could go on the legal trails, or they could go on the class 4 roads, but they couldn't go on the legal trails. Or if it's an event where somebody pays, like the Ranger or one of those other bike rides, they could do the class 4 roads, but not the legal trails. There was discussion about it getting very granular, like is it considered an event if I get 25 of my friends together and we all go on a bike ride? That's not an event to me because it's not organized by an organization. It's not put together by a third party. It's just you going out. So I think you have the opportunity to define events as you would like with the legal trails language.
So it seems like paying to belong to something or paying to play, for example, is the trigger there. So, for example, if the Tunbridge walking group decided they're going to have dues, does that become an event if a certain amount of them go because they're part of a paid club, or I was thinking the fox hunters that are around too?
I think it would depend. So if you pay membership dues and then the organization puts together the walk, then that's probably an event. But if you pay dues and you as a member get a map and you and your friends go walking, then that's not an event. So I think it rests in who has the organizational responsibility. As my own personal interpretation of what an event is.
So organized and paying, those are sort of the big triggers to some extent.
Right.
That's really helpful.
Any questions, Mike? All right, I see we have guests.
Can I just make one more?
Oh, okay.
I want to remind you that the town plan is awaiting your approval. We could offer some potential addended language to the sections that may or may not be waiting the decision on the trails that could reflect the state in which we are in right now. So sort of a middle ground where the goal could be for the trail to be multi-use, but at this point in time, until additional work is done, the trails are for pedestrian access only as indicated by the recommendations that we're delivering to you tonight, if that would be helpful. The Planning Commission just gets a little bit nervous as we're getting closer to the end of the year that it's not on your agenda yet. Because once we get to that point where you've had it for a year, then it comes back to us to go through the public hearing process again. And we've had a lot of meetings this year.
I think we had that on for the October 12th to approve that, so.
Great.
Did you look at the sort of timeline DEC has for permitting? Does it take a year, 2 years? Is it an easy, like 3 months thing, from start to finish? They're notoriously slow.
Julie said it was, so Julie Folsonby
Oh, right.
is our regional person. Very approachable. She, in her words, she said the potential permit for Crossroad is not insurmountable. She made it sound really approachable, actually. And I don't know, Rudy, if you have any, I have no direct experience with the permit process, so I can't speak from experience.
And I think it's all pretty new territory because wetland regulations underwent significant revisions in 2020. So there's a lot of new guidance and triggers on the various processes. Part of what she offered in walking it was that her primary jurisdiction is to determine what is jurisdictional or requires a permit. And there are things to do with whether it is a natural wetland or whether it is a wetland connected with a constructed feature, which is not under the same requirements. So that, when Laura says she thought that it was not insurmountable, the primary area on the crossroad is the lowest point is more than likely something, well, yeah, is connected to a natural wetland. The upper sections are more likely part of a constructed feature and will not necessarily trigger permitting.
Did she talk at all about something like you mentioned that, like the long trail? I mean, every time it goes into a wetland, do they have permitting, or because that's a maintained trail?
Yeah, this is a lot of the new territory. So Forest Parks and Recreation and the Wetlands Division have issued some specific guidance around trails and what does and doesn't trigger permits. Square footage that Laura was referring to, typically if there's more than 250 square feet of changes required, then it's going to require permitting. And that's, she said that was cumulative for the entire length of the trail. So if you put in fill or gravel or something like that, then most likely it would have to stay under 250 feet to do the non-reporting. Otherwise, it would trigger a permit.
Right.
You'll also note that Jonathan Bicknell, chair of the Trails Committee, is not here tonight. He has family in town and is happy to join you again at the next meeting if you want to talk specifically about how the Trails Committee approached this and the different issues and next steps for them.
Yeah, yes. that all you have for now?
Yes. Am I excused to my rocking chair? Or should I stay up here to answer more
You
questions?
should stay right there.
Okay. Gotcha.
We have many guests, like I said, and so we'll give everybody a chance to speak that wants to speak. But I guess I'd like to not have everyone go on for 20 minutes or half an hour. So keep it brief, but say all you want to say. Who would like to go first? Cal Hemingway.
Why not? You must be Rudy.
I am.
You do it from here or?
Right there is fine, yeah.
Now, I sent you an email today. What I'll try to do is to deal with one issue that I think deals with my particular excitement with legal criminal before. And a couple of observations on the draft. In as much as I've received emails from Steve Salter and Jonathan Beria, and Lori Berger, perhaps others in the role of sort of lost track of, who express opinions that are similar to mine. And I won't take you through all of that stuff. My exception is really dealing with my trail to nowhere. Let me just read to you, probably get to it fast. Since the 1970s, when we first bought land in Tunbridge, and I'm a flatlander, sorry about that. Not objected to Tunbridge neighbors' free access to my land. However, there was no public right of way potentially granting access to wheeled vehicles in the middle of one parcel. It is forested with no views and certainly not a recreation destination. Legal trail number 4, created without my knowledge or participation almost 10 years ago, is a trail to nowhere, taking a user 0.3 miles up to a ridge in the middle of the parcel and dead end, as I'm sure you're all aware. The only choice left to the responsible trail user and observer of the law is to enter the trail from Falls Hill Road, walk the 0.3 miles, then retrace his or her steps the 0.3 of a mile back down the Falls Hill Road. This trail design, in my opinion, is an invitation to violation of state statute regarding legal trail trespass. Inasmuch as the trail itself, as you also know, passes through my land from Falls Hill Road over to Angel's property to the west. And unless there's a sign up there or some kind of a monument, if the user would observe, there's no reason why they wouldn't just keep walking. It all looks the same. The Planning Commission offers signage as its solution to trespass. Person reaching the end and viewing the continuation of my trail, on the legal trail, who ignores or does not read the sign and follow its directives and proceeds will immediately guilty of trespass. I don't know what the sign said, but I'm paraphrasing. End of legal trail number 4. Turn around and go back down. Proceeding past this point is on private land and is trespass. Or there is no sign. The trail user does not recognize the end of the public right of way. And parenthetically, a similar sign was posted in April of this year and promptly taken down and removed by a user. I would submit that that would probably happen again. The user would then continue blissfully ignorant of his or her trespass. My immediate neighbor to the west has just posted his land. I would suggest that you ask the question, why? I submit that the town of Tunbridge is being asked to endorse trespass as a policy. If you offer an entitlement to the general public, forget signage. It will be ignored or removed or both. That's my pitch from the heart. As far as my trail to nowhere, I don't believe that it ever should have been created as a legal trail. I don't know how the planning commission had to work with it, but that's what they had to deal with. I never approached them on the question of whether or not it's valid, because that's really not there. I would make comments with respect to two areas. One is maintenance, coordination, and funding. I'm a member of the There Is No Such Thing as a Free Lunch School. Reading from the Vermont Statutes Title 19, which is roads. The town shall not be liable for construction, maintenance, repair, or safety of trails. Congratulations, you're supposed to fund something with no money. The proposed draft document indicates that Falls Hill Trail has recently been maintained. That's true. It was at my expense because I had a logging operation there and the logger very responsibly finished the job. Baptist Hill and Orchard Road maintenance, trail maintenance not addressed. Crossroad Trail maintenance mentions coordination with state district wetland equality. And in quotes, maintenance may be performed by volunteer groups. My questions would be, one, who pays? As a policy with respect to all legal trails in Tunbridge. Who coordinates? Again, a question. Who manages volunteer groups? What if maintenance is performed by volunteers is not sufficient to satisfy the landowner? I think all those questions could be part of a policy, and I don't know the answers to that. Part of my frustration as an individual is not getting enough meat, if you will, from some of the discussion to be able to comment one way or the other. Partnerships. The draft document, as Laura has mentioned, partnerships with landowners and trail abutters is important. It should not be the only decision point in deciding trail use and maintenance. I guess I'm trying to understand what that means. I would like to see in the draft an example or examples of partnerships with landowners. There was some discussion here that didn't make it into the draft, and I think it has to be able to bring it all forward. I'm an out-of-towner. I don't know many of the parties. I've tried to couch my issues as questions and not demanding answers, hoping to prompt some objective discussion and hopefully compromise. I have been disappointed. The draft seems to pose more questions than it addresses. In my opinion, does not do justice to the planning process. Thank you.
Anyone else?
I'm happy to answer questions.
Oh, okay.
As a curmudgeonly landowner.
I have a quick question. So based on your description of the trail to nowhere, are you proposing that you would like to grow up the legal trail?
In the past, number one, I've observed a lot of abuse. Of the trail. Now, whether it was a trail then or a legal trail then or not, I don't know. Because I only became aware of this whole situation the summer of last year. My wife and I have always felt that we wanted to be good neighbors. We would allow anybody who wanted to use it for whatever purpose they felt appropriate, as long as they left it as they found it. And I'd love to find some way that we can make this continue to happen. The fact that it is there's a legal trail there, granting a right of way, as a discussion here earlier this evening revealed, is that granting a right of way makes life a little bit difficult, more difficult for me as a landowner, because it permits essentially any vehicle you want without some sort of a situation. So I would say, if it were removed as a legal trail, I would make it available. I don't know if that answers the question.
It does.
All right, anyone else?
I just had a follow-up to that. Does anybody know when the dates of each of the 4 legal trails were designated legal trails? Did it all happen in that accident resolved in 73, or was one like Falls Hill a later one?
I don't know, but it's a good question.
So I think the crossroads was back in World War II. Euclid said that they pulled all the culverts to melt down for the war effort. And then Cal's property was recovered along with, ironically, the other trail that abuts your land with my parents, which goes to the McFeeters property, which was a class 4 trail. And so that was sort of, I mean, sorry, that's class 4. And then I think you said that Orchard Road was in like the early 70s, right? Or 80s.
The state
Yeah.
changed, there was a designation
Yeah.
change of roads then, right?
Legal trail number 4 was, I believe, 2013. The other ones were more consistent in passing of the legislation. As Matt mentioned, legal trail number 4 actually is on Goodwin Hill. And it's the property line between Ross land and my land. And so I told you, I have copies of the Selectboard meeting minutes, if I can make it.
So what happened to that legal trail?
Well, that's a class 4. So that was, I think, when my parents first bought the land, and then when Cal and Sue bought the land, it was a mess. It was, you couldn't go through it. And then Paul Harwood supervised logging, and they sort of opened up, at which point I think your father became aware that that was access to the land. And then it was put to the select board, I think, and Cal and Sue and my parents went up. But I think that it was viewed as insufficient. And so that then during the ancient roads decision, it was discovered. But as I noted it in one of the smaller meetings, that was a case where, and that, I mean, in Cal, I mean, that too is a road to nowhere, as is Goodwin Hill. So I understand the point, but there are a lot, I mean, there are quite a few of those in Tunbridge. And I think in that case, that does have a no wheeled vehicle sign at the top, which has been there, I agree with Cal, the sign at the bottom of Falls Hill Road was removed within 2 weeks or something like that. But that sign has remained in place. But at the time of the ancient roads decision, my father actually requested that that trail, which again had been forgotten, be turned into a legal trail. And the class 3 road ends at a culvert, so you wouldn't have lost a culvert. And the select board's decision at that time was no. And there was no debate, there was no public comment. And that's the question I would ask is, what has changed that we are in this position where we are having this fierce debate over this, when really, think about this weekend. We had a horse event that went through, that has gone through for year after year. And for those of us who live on a road that comes up from the fairground, there are horses walking 6 abreast up the road. And if you go faster than 12 miles an hour, they sneer at you. I mean, that's what happens when you live in a rural community. And as I said before, if we had this influx of bikers or pogo stick riders, you would see them on your road. I mean, and John, I'm saying this from my perspective on Falls Hill Road. You live next to one of these roads, and so have, I think, a good perspective on how much people are using it. And I know that Todd, who runs a small event, not as big as the Ranger, I would say that Todd's experience is probably that when he signs people up for bike rides saying, travel the scenic roads of Vermont, half of the people bail out, sorry, Tunbridge, half of the people bail out after 10 miles because it's too steep. So unlike, ATVs, for instance, where you don't have to worry about how you get up the hill, when you're cycling, you do. And for a lot of these roads, and, I mean, not to contradict Cal, but Falls Hill Road, that trail is not used by anyone. And I think this is the other question that I would ask about this policy is policy or ordinance. If it's a policy, the people who are going to abide by it are townspeople. And the people who aren't are going to be the people who either don't care or don't know, and who look at VTrans maps and see that they're class 4 roads, or who look at the gazetteer and see that there are roads that can be ridden on. And unless we put at the bottom of every one of these roads a white sign that says legal trail closed to this use, and sort of turn it into New Jersey, which I would say will have no effect, because at the top of Ward Hill Road, there's a big sign saying $500 fine for dumping. And Amy and I pulled out 50 tires this year with Rose, 7-year-old Rose Lovin. And so I think that's the other question I would ask is, what will this measure take? And this is not to say that we shouldn't reconsider it on a yearly basis, and we should observe and say, are people abusing these trails? But I just think that a ton of effort has been exerted here, and a lot of strong feelings have been shared. But I think that we're arguing about something that's not really a big issue. And again, returning to I think the trail that's nearest to me, I think if we say we're going to shut off every trail to Norwood, every trail or road to nowhere in Tunbridge, we are going to reduce the footprint of Tunbridge roads by 15%.
Anyone else with a comment? Ms. Berger.
With all due respect, there is a lot of usage, and those of us that have trails showing up in our front door yards would beg to differ with you as far as who's using them, how often they're used, and what the impact is on the people who abut those trails. And certainly for the crossroad in particular, where the trail runs pretty much right up to people's door yards, that's a big impact. It's a big impact on people's privacy, certainly. And as been mentioned earlier, I don't know if the members of the select board have had the opportunity to read the letter that I sent, but so I won't go over it in great detail, but just will sum it up for others here. People who built on and bought property abutting town trails did so with the reasonable expectation that those trails were not likely to be put back into active use. As Laura mentioned, there was no way that we could see into the future and predict that with technology, et cetera, changes in the culture, that suddenly we would have all of these bicycles and other things, ATVs, and to have fundraising events and other kinds of events that would be taking place using these trails. So given that it was not predicted, but we're still stuck with it right now, where does that leave landowners and abutters? And I would say that landowners are really the second-class citizens here. When I look at the amount of maintenance that's going to be required, the signage, the whatever, the permitting process, having to go through the state, having to figure out who's going to supervise this, as Cal said, who is going to be in charge of whether it's volunteers doing the work or anybody else, the heavy equipment that's going to be required to get into the crossroad to do the kind of work that that road would need if you were going to resurrect it to anything except pedestrian use. It's an insane amount of money, of time, of effort. And even if grant funding, for example, were used to fund some of this initially, you know darn well that at town meeting in the next several years, somebody's going to stand up and say, but we need more money for these trails to maintain and do it. And next thing you know, the taxpayers are paying for that. And I want to know why the taxpayers in general and why the landowners, butters, are going to have to work this hard to satisfy a particular special interest group. If you leave the trails open to the public as far as being for pedestrian use only, you're not going to have to do all of this heavy duty work that you would have to do to accommodate cyclists. I don't understand why. I can't speak for all the other landowners, but I know I feel like I'm being held hostage to that. And it seems to me that one of the jobs of town government or of any government is to make sure that the rights of a small group of people are not run over by a larger, more vociferous group of people, that they have the same rights. And it's going to be up to you to make that call. I should add that I am an outdoors person. I'm a professional equestrian. My horses are stabled right next to the crossroad. And yet I'm not advocating that I be allowed to use the crossroad to ride, nor for my clients to use it, nor for organized horse events, because I know the amount of damage that it does to trails to have a lot of equestrian use. I'm willing to sacrifice that for the good of my community, for the good of the environment, and because I respect my neighbors and other landowners that may not want horse poop in their front yard or may not want groups of horse people coming through. And so I'm willing to give that up, my right to use those trails with my horse, because I care about those things and I care about my community. And it just feels to me very much that we're thinking so much about the community of people who want to use those trails for other things besides walking. What about the community that's here? What about the community that has land right next to these trails and that is coming to these meetings and saying, we don't want this? And I don't think any of us that are abutters, and I'm sorry if I'm speaking for anyone that I shouldn't speak for, want to say that this is no longer part of the public domain or to shut them off to public usage. I certainly don't want to shut them down to public usage, but why not take it to the least destructive usage and most efficient and least costly, which is pedestrian use. And I would encourage the select board, if you have not done so already, to please look at the tremendous amount of material that is on the website, letters from many of us in this room that got shunted off to the website for the Trails Committee. And if you haven't looked at them, I beg you to go through and take a look and see what people's concerns are. Thank you.
Great. Anyone else?
Well, I thought there'd be more people talking. I guess there would be.
Oh, Deb raised her hand.
Okay.
I didn't recognize her as Deb, but Deb was here.
So I live on the crossroad, and I agree with about 100% of what Lori says, because I'm the one that looks out my window and sees people going through my yard all the time. I see people parked in my yard that go down into the crossroad, whether, walking or whatever. And I know it's a town trail and all of that, but there needs to be a lot of stuff addressed, I think, before any major decisions are made on usage, because there's parking issues, I think, on every town trail. There's not parking lots beside the roads where people can park. In the crossroad, it's either park in my yard or park out on Monarch Hill Road, and then you have the milk truck trying to get through, mail, people, all kinds of stuff. Not that this matters that much, but I still question when the crossroad was thrown up as a town trail, because when I was a kid, there were culverts down there, and I'm not that old. So the belief that it got thrown up because they took the culverts out, I don't know how valid that is, because I remember seeing culverts down in there. They weren't in the road, they were flipped over the bank, but anyway, I just, when I first bought the land and built my house, I could let my dogs out. I didn't have to worry about them getting run over or getting dragged off, following somebody down the trail. I had cats. I don't have dogs or cats anymore, but if I did, then I would be in a different position than I was years ago when I had pets, because I wouldn't dare just leave them, let them go out like I used to. It's changed so much. The traffic is so heavy on the crossroad now. I can't believe how it has changed.
All right, Todd, you are next.
Yeah, I would just want to reiterate something that I said a long time ago. This current issue's been going on for more than a year. It started on August 18th last year. Although there were some other events before that. That the traditional use, and I know there are some of us from the disagree with this, and some may just say, well, we don't want the traditional use in Tunbridge. Legal trails was for all non-motorized usage by the public. Now, I agree, a lot of changes have happened in the last 2 or 3 decades with mapping, outside use, etc. But I'd like to go to what Laura, I don't know if she was advocating for this, but one sort of carryover thing that could be in the sort of planning commission update that's town is that with a lot of checking in with the state wetlands expert, and it'd be great if she could come before snowplow, that those traditional usages with signage and responsible public advocacy would be allowed. As I commented, I think Jonathan Bicknell is not here, but he did follow up on a lot of work that I did as far as contacting surrounding towns. If we were to restrict our legal trails, either closing them or only to pedestrian, we would be pretty unique in the entire state of Vermont. And the term that I use, I don't like to use it, but would be an outlier. So I just want the select board to keep that in mind.
Dan.
I like the word unique. I think Tunbridge should be unique. It's hard with the immigration. This is my first meeting, but I've heard both sides, and both sides are right. It's a town trail that should be able to use that way, but the landowners are right too. Who wants someone going through their yard, whenever they want to? And you've got a difficult decision. I would recommend it just be pedestrian use, because, and is there some way, well, no, then it's gonna be expensive for the town to maintain these trails for other use, and that was the whole purpose in the beginning of why the town blew up, Class 4 roads, and was to not maintain them. And how many miles of Class 4 class 3 roads, December tab, class 2, 3, 4, and we're talking about 3 miles of trails, that probably would be more expensive to maintain than some of the class 4 roads. It just doesn't make any sense. to me. Oh,
Thank you.
I have one more comment about signage. Signage doesn't work. I had a conversation with a guy with a bicycle that came out off the crossroad right by the sign. And I stopped him and I said, the trail is closed. And he said, I didn't know that until I got here. And I said, well, you had to have come in on the other end and you rode right by the sign. And he said, no, I was riding with my friends and they were trying to tell me how to get here without going on the crossroad. But somehow I got here and I just ended up on the crossroad. And I said, well, either way, you were trespassing or you were on the legal trail with your bike, riding it when you weren't supposed to be. So if this is to continue and you're thinking about signage, I would suggest cable. Because, and leave a little space for people to get through, not wide enough for handlebars, no, but and not wide enough for a horse either. But, you know, it can't just be a sign because they just ignore the signs. It's the same thing people did that came through in August. There's a dozen more of them. And they just go by the signs, they don't care. That's my.
Thank you.
I'm going.
Wanted to add with this, so there is no way through the crossroad right now, because there are trees down across the crossroad. Anybody coming through there with a bicycle would have to be putting that up over their head, walking along the trail. There's not enough room under the trees to slide them under the trail. The only way that you can get through the crossroad, signs, no signs, is if you leave the crossroad and you cross onto either Priscilla Farnham's land or to Deb's land. And Deb has, she has white tape up that indicates that you shouldn't be going on her land. And people have just done what they wanted to do. Oh, look, there's a tree. We'll just go around that. We'll just go right here and we'll just walk over the tape. And so that gives you an idea of what the attitude is of some folks, not all certainly, that are using this trail. So you're hoping that signage is going to do something. Well, you know, the equivalent of gates and bars, which is all those trees, hasn't done anything, and the signs haven't done anything. And I'm not sure by what miracle that will change.
Oh, Anita.
Gary, this will be quick, I promise, it's getting late. So I'm speaking on behalf of Priscilla Farnham. She is a 40-year resident of the Crossroad, and as you know, her husband Euclid was a lifelong resident. She is deeply concerned about the long-term ramifications of allowing bikes on the very fragile road, as well as the effects of these proceedings on the Tunbridge community itself. She is asking the Selectboard to adopt an ordinance authorizing only pedestrian activity, walking, hiking, skiing, and snowshoeing on the public trails. She also felt there was enough trails and roads everywhere else except these very beautiful, very fragile trails to use, and that she wished them luck finding other places.
Right, thank you. John.
Thank you, Gary. I just wanted to address a couple of things. I provided you an overly long letter, which everything I have to say on this subject, so I really will try to be brief. I just want to address this question of an ordinance, relative to policy. And this is I'm a landowner and I'm trying to figure out what's allowed. And I'm frankly confused about where we stand now. I thought that the select board had adopted a regulation by ordinance adopting a pedestrian only policy. I don't know if that's expired or not, so I feel like we're in a kind of a limbo. But regardless of that, going forward, I think it's essential that there be an ordinance.
also wanted to address the question of events. For me, this is no solace. Events are defined in terms of whether they're organized by some entity, I guess is the idea, or whether you have to pay money. But what I'm concerned about is the volume. And as far as I can tell, and I thought that Laura was quite eloquent in explaining how modern technology has made bicycle use a very threatened use. But if somebody in the region puts out a notice and says to 200 of their closest contacts by email or any of these other things that they don't use, and says, meet me at the Stratford Road and Moody Road at 10 o'clock on Sunday, and let's see the fall foliage. You know, that could be 10 or 12 people like we had on the crossroad the other week, or it could be 20 or 30 or 40. And that's not an event. And very large groups of people and smaller groups in multiple numbers can organize themselves without being an event. And you know, I've invited the Vermont Horse Association onto the property a couple of times, and you know, they wreak havoc, but then then it's over. What I'm concerned about is constant traffic that would come, small, medium, and large, and events don't do it for them. I just want to, on the wetlands question, I just want to raise one sort of technical point. There are two issues here. One is, do you have to get authorization to fill in, to destroy during a wetland? And what exemptions are there? We've been talking about that. But there's another issue, which is whether an activity itself is unlawful under the wetlands laws. And my conversations with the DEC indicate that the biking activity itself may violate the wetlands law. It certainly violates the wetlands law if it harms the wetlands. I have pretty clear direction. That was the clear interpretation I got from the DEC. So I think that one has to focus. I don't think it's correct to say that we could just allow the bikers to go and there would be no wetlands issues. There are wetlands issues if bikers continue to use these trails in an unimproved condition. The final thing I want to make is I think we're making this, for your purposes, we're maybe making this much more complicated than it needs to be. And as I understand the recommendation, it is that the Baptist Hill Trail be closed to public use, apart from the part that overlaps with the Bass Trail, so that they can continue to do that. With respect to the other trails, the proposal is that if we limited to pedestrian use, actual pedestrian use, hiking, walking, snowshoeing, and skiing. I think my friend Brenda put in the no use of the crossroad during winter, only in the winter, which is going to be very disappointing to people who pick up the Tunbridge Trails book and want to go through the Orchard, down Orchard Road, through the Dodge Farm, along the relatively dry portion of the Orchard Road that John and I share, and then go left and up the hill. So I think I would just recommend that you do away with that limitation about winter use only. And I think what you're being offered is a proposal for an ordinance, interim ordinance, a temporary ordinance, an ordinance for on an indefinite period that says with respect to the remaining trails, pedestrian only. And that implements what's been proposed to you. I stand with the landowners and the walkers and the horse people and the snow machine people and thinking that should be the long-term solution. Because I think that this is bikers against the landowners and the rest of the community, as far as I'm concerned. Balancing the wetlands issues and the impact on landowners, impact on other uses. I think the balance clearly comes out in favor of keeping these trails as pedestrian on a long-term basis. But I don't think you're troubled with having to make that long-term decision. Your challenge now is trying to figure out how to implement the recommendation you've been given and how to get us through the winter. And for that purpose, I think it's pretty clear that you can implement what you've been given, which is to say, for the time being, pedestrian only on the 3 trails and the Baptist Hill Trail closed. And as I say, I think that has to be in the form of an ordinance and not just a recommendation.
If I could just clarify one thing, I was not actually saying, I agree with John that it should be an ordinance if there's a decision. I think as has been discussed, if we litter the town with white signs saying, only for pedestrian traffic, whatever, I think half of them are going to disappear. And the ATVers whom we complain about are still going to go, well, maybe I shouldn't pick on the ATVers, but those who want to avoid it are still going to go around the signs. I think the parking issue, which I absolutely understand, I will say, I don't think that's bikers, because I think the bikers park down on 110 or down in South Royalton. I think that's another issue that needs to be resolved, is if we're talking about pedestrian traffic, where do people park? But I think that, again, the question needs to be asked, how do we make some enforceable measure that stops people from doing whatever we agree? And then is there actually going to be some mechanism for enforcing that? And you drive around and look at We Stand with Wayland signs, and it seems like it's difficult to enforce like felony laws, much less local traffic laws.
Thank you. Anyone else? Brenda?
Real brief. Yeah, the wetlands caution weighs heavily on me, and a caution to you. When you deal with this, I think we have to be real careful about that. And I'm not even sure whether walking through these wetlands, Rudy would have to, whether we're clear, whether we can even do that. Hence why we did a temporary thing about winter, the winter coming up, just so we could look at that, make sure that if any volume increase.
I just want this.
And just let me finish with my train of thought, because I want to just be done. The other one is the Class 4. You had a man in here earlier. I had the picture to die for. My camera wouldn't start. I went up on Taylor Road during this past weekend, and I knew it was going to happen, so I went up there to take a picture of it. I thought it'd be funny more than anything. And sure enough, all the horses were coming through. I was driving around the poop, dozens of horses everywhere. I stopped where the Hoyts are getting ready to do a nice, peaceful B&B. And I can hear the overlanders grinding up Class 4. And the horses are going down. It was great big traffic jam. That's what I was looking for my picture. So you've got a volume. We've got a volume change in our town. If ATVers get added to it on that Class 4 road, I get quite concerned about us kind of controlling this as we become so popular for everybody to come here and play. And I just wanted to point out just briefly that if it went in a certain direction, that John has offered to go around. Again, I don't know about cost. As a taxpayer in town, I don't want to pay more. I don't want to pay more. I mean, I'm with you, Lori, on that. Taxes are high enough. But he has offered to go around.
Very quickly, in defense of my amendment to Brenda's proposal about winter use, it seems, it's clear to me, it's clear from the wetlands rules of the state that for better or for worse, bird watching, walking, similar activities are allowed in wetlands under the state rules. Biking is much more debatable, and certainly biking or hurts wetlands is more debatable, but walking is an allowed use in wetlands. So, and not that I would encourage people to go on any of these wetlands, but I don't want to close off the Orchard Trail and prevent people from enjoying that trail and getting up to high ground in order to, by barring pedestrian use. That would be my recommendation.
You know more about it than I would.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes.
I don't cycle, I don't horseback ride, I don't do anything except walk and run, but what I hear being said, if I step back, which is upsetting to me is, my form of recreational use is better than yours. So bikers are threatening, that keeps coming up over and over. And I feel like, are we a town that says, I'm better than you are because I ride a horse, or you're worse than I am because you're a cyclist, or, oh, you're the best of all because all you do is walk. So this isn't really speaking to how you're going to address this issue, but I think it speaks to the kind of town we want to be and what we all enjoy doing, and the tolerance that we can show toward each other in the town about, we all are here for different things. Some people ATV, some people cycle, some people run, pogo stick, whatever, ski, all of it. And I think we have to think really hard about taking things away that we have and that we all enjoy here. So that's my thought.
Thank you. Did you have something, John?
Yeah, I just want to ask Laura and Rudy, did you, I don't know, take testimony is the right word, but on just because it got so much into trails in general, not just legal trails, but like now VASA with Ian tonight, and certainly bike trails like Rasta or Northeast Kingdom trails on private lands, what their triggers are for DEC and wetlands, because they must constantly cross wetlands, they must upgrade. You know, there's a bridge, you know, that VASA put in across a brook on John's land, you know, and I just wondered how that permitting goes and how if it's any different between private landowners and, in this case, a town right of way.
It's a good question. Our very first listening session, presentation on legal trails, we were joined by a member of Rasta who talked about their trail network. I don't remember him specifically talking about wetlands because I don't think they were at that moment in time as much on our radar as they are now with our level of understanding. But that's certainly information that we could find out about how they're handled on public lands versus private.
And just going forward, right, since we're not certainly anti-trail in Tunbridge, if there's future trails created on private lands, you know, what are the triggers, what are the, you know, the sort of standards that either landowners or the town can sort of hope for.
And this is part of the issues with the changes in the 2020 wetland regulations.
Right.
There have definitely been significant changes, and I think there's still a lot I don't understand about them. I think part of the reason for the recommendation about frozen ground on Orchard Road was concerns with even just foot traffic. And one of the things that we've seen elsewhere in the state is that organizations that help maintain trails can address issues such as that. So part of the reason for saying for now, there are concerns about this. It's best to have it on frozen ground until a plan can be developed, until we know what permitting constraints there are and understand more of those pieces. Part of the walk with the wetlands ecologist was that she can determine jurisdictional constraints, but she can't actually address a plan until there is a plan.
All right, anyone else? Darn it. We're done with this portion. Now, we've got to do the heavy lifting. Heavier lift,
Well, I think,
not tonight.
right. I mean, I think first on behalf of the select board, I would like to thank the planning commission and the trails committee for endless hours, a lot of tolerance and patience, and thank the town too for, I mean, even though there was rancor and hard feelings, I think it's really made us think about the outdoors, access to the outdoors, what we really want for our town. And that's a good thing.
Yep. Yes, thank you, Laura, and everyone who took part.
And now we sometime in the next month, we'll come up with something.
Yep, I want to digest a little bit.
And maybe more research too.
Yep.
If you have any other questions, I can send them to Paul. He's been responsive within a couple days with questions that we posed to him about different understandings of either statutory law or just interpretation of language. So happy to be your contact or to send, again, you his email address so you can contact him directly. And I'll put together that more annotated version using the documentation that we already have, so that there's no interpretation associated with it. It will just be what we've got already posted as public comment, but in one place.
And then in regards to the town plan, do you want Laura to edit those blurbs, like those sections that you had discussed, so that it's kind of more based off of this recommendation so that you can approve it next week?
Be handy, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I'll put some clauses together that you could
That you might
ponder.
potentially add.
Right, because the language right now says something to the effect of legal trails are open to all recreational use, such as bikes, walking, horses. I think if we just add a clause in there that distinguishes that we're in a specific point in time, we can always edit the town plan, and then we will be needing to edit it again, you know, once it comes around to it. So there are timeframes, and it can be changed at any point in time as we move along.
Under review.
Could I offer an alternative point of view?
Sure, Liz.
On the town plan, because it's not a regulatory document, I think the less said, the better. And so as opposed to putting in really detailed, like, this is what's going on Baptist Hill, if you just say the legal trails are open for recreation, period. And then if you want to regulate what type of recreation goes on, the proper place to do that is an ordinance. So I don't think the town plan is a place to like get too into the weeds. I think that undermines the broad vision that it sort of serves. So that's an alternative, is just take every section where it says recreation and put a period after it and get rid of.
Would you say it's under review?
I mean, where you elaborate is in the ordinances, if necessary, but because it's a 5-year document, so.
They're 8, yeah.
Or 8, sorry, that's right, they changed it. 8-year document, so in 8 years. No, just say it's open for recreation, period, and then you can get in the weeds in the proper place.
I would be a little concerned saying that, because that would mean it's open for what kind of recreation? I like the idea of just saying it's under review. Is it open for ATVs? Is it open for the pogo sticks? I'm really worried about pogo sticks.
Yeah, me too.
Those pogo stick people are terrible.
One-legged horses.
Clarification.
Sure.
So while you are making your decisions, et cetera, right now, what is the status? And Deb and I have been thoroughly baffled as to what is or is not permitted on the crossroad during this interim period. So could you just clarify that, please?
Is there a recommendation from the planning commission or
Well, did we at some point move an extension to when was the original, Brenda, do you remember when our original
July 15th was when it originally ran out,
ran out?
I believe.
And was there an extension after that?
I don't know.
I don't think it just went on until you made the decision.
Yeah,
I don't think you put a deadline on it.
I understood it that it was
Under review
Under
until we
review.
come up with something.
for the notice?
Right. So I'm okay with leaving it that way. If that's the
Well, as long as it's
understanding.
just walking.
Right.
I mean, I don't
Just
remember,
pedestrian only.
was it just pedestrian only? Was that our last resolution or whatever you call it?
I think it was a motion. I don't
Yeah.
know what that is.
it was voting on.
Right. So it's like, it's neither policy nor
Yes.
ordinance, I guess. I don't know.
Well, it's not, no, it's not policy or ordinance. It was just a motion made by one of us.
Like,
Oh, Mike.
I remember.
Oh,
You need 2 more signs to go back up on Falls Hill Road. Those got stolen.
Yeah.
both ends.
But, for the record, so what went into effect on June 1st, as I recall, and it might have even been reflected on the signs, I want to know if it's different now, was that walking only and horseback riders and cyclists needed to either dismount and walk their horse and walk their bike. So are we having a change now, or it's what was in effect from June 1st past July 15th, just for clarification?
Well, if I could make a motion, which I can't, I would move just walking.
That's gonna be from now until we make a decision?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll make a motion, it's just walking.
All right, I second that.
All right, any further discussion? John,
I support the substance of the motion. I'm just concerned that, as I understand the town's legal position, I would agree. If there's no ordinance, and there isn't even a policy, then everything is allowed. And Old Village was in the road, so ATVs are allowed. So as I understand it, the town's position is, if that's what the select board has done, now bicycles are allowed, motorcycles, I don't know about motors, ATVs are certainly allowed now. But I don't think that's what we want. Maybe that's what-
I think the
ATVs are not allowed right now.
sign,
to
the
be-
sign says trails closed. Except for pedestrians, right?
Well, normally on any circumstance, ATVs would not be allowed. And without special permission of the select board to use certain roads. You haven't done that.
That's not Old Village's advice to you. Old Village's advice to the town is that ATVs are allowed now, in the absence of an ordinance and a regulation blocking.
But if you close a road, then log trucks can't go on that road, cars can't go on that road, right?
If you do, I guess that ordinance should specify that. I think if you don't have an ordinance, then you don't have a vote.
But ordinances, you can't just vote on an ordinance, John.
No, well, I understand. I'm just
Right.
explaining why we're
But I think,
comfortable limbo.
and I'm not sure what the triggers are, but probably emergency is one, right?
Correct. We
One-
go where we want it.
No, it's not, it may not be a rise to an emergency, but environmental, I mean, why we post roads or close roads during mud season, for example, like the road foreman probably could close a road because it's impassable,
but
that's not an ordinance.
Isn't that
I think the select board has that. They have the right, I believe, to close the road. Laura, is that what you got to?
Yeah,
Or
and
walking only.
I would, again, I'm not an attorney, so this is my opinion and interpretation of your own powers, is that given the concerns with the wetlands, and we don't want to be in a position of encouraging people to actively use areas that are maybe protected by state law, that you would have the authority to close access, just like you would to have closed access to a class 4 road or a class 3 road if there was, some sort of weather event, that you would have the same authority to do that. But probably it wouldn't be wise to do that forever until it's addressed, or until you come up with a policy or an ordinance. And the League of Cities and Towns has great language, which I'll put in there, that they sent to us, that's on our webpage, about the difference between a policy and an ordinance and what it means for the town and the people impacted by it.
So I guess I think that Mike can make a motion and John can second it. Am I wrong?
Are you asking me for permission to?
Don't go to Laura.
I know.
All right. Are you comfortable with your second?
Yeah.
Okay. Any further
And
discussion?
it's a temporary,
Yeah, until we can
like a
come.
closing of.
Right. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Aye. It's passed. So walking only for now.
Until we make a decision.
Yep.
Mariah, what's the timeline for an ordinance
I believe it's 60 days.
with at least one public meeting?
Yes, but I'll double check.
You can get off the hot seat.
Thank you.
I'm sorry about that.
It's okay.
You could have been in a rocking chair.
It's not the first time.
Oh, you had your hand up at one point. Sorry, I
I
forgot
just
you.
want you to notice that the 6 of us here are in the Tunbridge Walking Group. And we really appreciate, I hope I'm okay speaking for everyone, really appreciate these trails. And the landowners allowing us to go on the trails, legalized trails and then private trails. We try to always ask permission. We try to stay off when it's wet, in the season when it's wet. So we're concerned that the trails stay in the condition that they're in. And that is the burden that the landowner has to take over, not the town, because legally they're responsible. So we're concerned to see how things pan out here so that those trails stay open for people who would like to walk on them.
Thank you. All right, I think we've beat that horse to death. What's next?
Well, we had other business.
Other business, I like that.
What's next after
Cheese and crackers, I hope.
Betsy here?
She's not here, but that is just something that I think I put on the last page in your little packet here. A letter from Mike Saka discussing how he's urging you to vote in favor of Betsy to be chair again.
Yep.
And then I did also speak to Eliza Minucci, who is part of that group, and
She is.
Pardon?
I spoke
See you
to
this
you.
weekend? Yes.
I came in case
you Okay.
had questions about that.
You'd ask questions about.
Well, we're gonna have a brief
This is
Okay.
recess. Well,
About what?
About the Betsy,
Selectboard minutes, starting around 2010.
Yeah, the road.
Review was, I don't go any further older than that.
Yeah.
I was able to get that from.
Okay, so we can get
Should be
that.
able to find all that.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Cal. So Eliza,
What'd that girl
is her term up and we need to reappoint her?
Yeah.
But only Betsy?
Yes.
Well,
And our commission is working, we just started developing a document so that we know.
Okay.
We're getting a little more formal, and let me know when everybody's up.
You gotta get up here, I can't hear what you're saying.
Sorry. My background noise. So we are now aware of when everybody's term is up. Hers is up this year. Betsy Geisers, we voted 3-1. We had 2 absences that night to urge you to reappoint her to our commission. And we are now aware of when the rest of us will be up, which is not
How many on
until
the commission?
currently 6. We're eager for more. It through state regulations, whatever we're governed by, it's 3 to 9. We'd love to have more. And the next ones of us are Ellen and myself, and we're not up until 2023.
Because I would suspect that we would renew Betsy, but the commission itself would choose the chair, because we don't usually appoint.
Oh, yes,
chairs.
and you're not appointing to the chair, just to have another 4-year term
right.
on. And we are going to set like an annual date for choosing chair. We've talked about how some of us who have positions don't necessarily need to keep them, she and myself, especially. So we're working on making a more regular schedule of renewing those jobs and stuff.
That's often done right after town meeting. You do your like first meeting after town meeting, and you do your organizational meeting,
Yes.
and elect your chair. Registrar.
Thank you. That's just the kind of advice we need. Do you want to join?
I will stand up for Betsy advisor with her expertise and her institutional knowledge of what's going on in town, including ancient roads, that history. She's a real asset. It's great that she's there as a resource.
I move we reappoint Betsy Geiser
I
for a
second it.
4-year term to the Conservation Commission.
I second it.
All right, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Well done. You could be a lobbyist.
And she
Oh,
is.
no, don't. Good luck.
Yeah, enjoy the hot potato, guys.
Hot potato, that makes me hungry.
That's the last agenda.
Hot potato, that makes me.
Yeah, now we're just approving warrants and minutes.
And a drawing.
Thank
Can I
you.
ask
Thank
you a
you.
question? Or I just overheard earlier about.
Did you think they're gonna thin out
Yep.
after a while?
You gotta wait.
I gotta go home. Look at the horseradish cheese.
Was being presented for, yeah, yeah,
That's
so
what
it's
I
a
thought.
60-day period from the time the public hears about it until adoption, with a public meeting up for discussion with the,
Thank you,
Remember
Rudy.
when your
Thank you,
predecessor
Rudy.
wrote that up.
Take care.
So,
Yeah.
and that 60 days is not starting now.
it's not, no.
Okay.
Would it be, do we actually approve the ordinance as a select board or we
I think you would,
present it?
I think that you would approve like the language and what you're
Right.
wanting to
We'd
adopt,
come up with the
Right.
ordinance and then everybody would have to read it.
right? Like
Okay.
kind of how we went through with the anti-discrimination policy that we're now voting on at the next meeting.
Right.
You know,
So
we talked about it
make
at
public,
meetings.
Not that we vote
Exactly.
on it, 'cause we do it at the end, I would think.
Right,
After edits, maybe.
right, right.
But a first draft, I guess. Present.
So at the end of the 60 days, if there was a proposed ordinance, then the public weighs in a public meeting.
Correct.
And then you all can either adjust or just confirm both. Got it.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. I put my lawyer hat on for a second. All right.
Todd,
But
What I,
You get paid for that?
what's it say? Bitchin?
Good.
What, Jim? That seems out of
It does.
character.
It does.
Maybe it was dying.
Oh, what I'd like is to maybe send our thoughts to Paul Gillis and have him draft it. Just send notes and say, this is what we wanted them. And then it would save us doing it all wrong and then having him just revise it anyway.
Right. Or Mariah could whip it up. and then-
Right, I can do that.
And everybody go.
If they heard there was no cheese and crackers, they got the hell out of here. Another thing I was thinking about as far as legal trails goes is like my
Oh, these are
sister.
good. I don't have to.
Yeah, the ones with the sticky note. Yeah, you just need to sign. But one of
There's a new one
the
though, right?
ones that one you need to look at.
Oh, okay.
My sister's driveway is on the Monarch Hill Road side of the crossroad. And technically, if we say only walking, she can't drive a car up the driveway,
Right.
so we need to have some,
She's actually
That
on the
whole
crossroad.
road, the whole road is a legal trail.
the whole driveway is a legal trail. And it goes all the way over to Euclid.
So as soon as you get
There's no class. 3
1.5 rods off Monarch Hill, you're on the crossroad.
So I think we need to make it so that she can get to her house and access it in every way and stuff like that. And if she has a horse, for instance, which she doesn't, she could lead it down or ride it
Well, it'd
down.
be only if somebody complained, right?
Right. Well, yeah, but also,
Right, if it's an ordinance, we have. to make sure
Right.
about that.
and also for maintenance. I mean, if you,
Right, that's
the
true.
tree blows down upon your land and the best way to go is up Orchard Road with your tractor, you gotta have the right, which I guess you do anyway.
Well, that's what it sounded like with the.
Well, that's what it sounded like,
Dinner.
but.
I think I was wondering if it goes through a wetland, but it's on our land, and I want to
Yeah, but
improve that.
what if it's on a legal trail?
Right,
You
that's
go
what I'm
through it.
wondering. Can I do that? Could I
Right.
have Matt come in,
Right.
put 6 loads of hard
Right.
pack down so I could access a wood lot?
All right,
Right.
I don't know. Just because the town gets involved. And I don't even know. This is
Are we
why,
still
once you
being
get into
recorded?
the DEC and wetlands, it gets really tricky because
Right.
I know, right, with loggers, Forest Parks and Rec oversees lots of.
Yeah.
Right, they're not allowed to go, you know, during
But
wet months.
a
without putting
logger's-
in bridges.
A logger's allowed to go on a legal trail.
Well, it sounded like it, but I'm not sure. It
Well,
goes through a wetland.
When we first started this, I read that, and a logger can go on, you cannot stop a logger from going on legal trails.
Unless it goes through a wetland.
Well,
I think
that
the
was
DEC
probably
has
before a
jurisdiction.
wetland.
Right.
Well, in other
And
words,
just for the record, I was riding in a Jeep down Falls Hill Road before Cal Hemingway even knew where it was.
Right.
so.
I figured that. It wasn't a skeleton.
No, it was a Jeep. Daddy had a Jeep.
World War II, and he was.
Yeah.
looking
Cousin
for
David
Germans and
Farnsworth
Israelis.
had a Jeep.
Who did?
Dave Farnsworth.
Yeah. The current Dave Farnsworth?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, before I forget, Judy Howe talked to me a while ago about the town hall furnace.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you that too, so thank you.
Get him on it.
What did Judy say to you about it?
Just that it needs to be addressed. We need to decide what we want to do with it because they don't want to deliver fuel. Like, do we want to have it a different way to
Because of the
access it?
tanks?
Yeah,
Oh,
they
because
don't,
they're inside, it's inside.
yeah,
I thought we addressed that somehow.
They actually gave us an extension or whatever you want to call
Oh.
it for last year. And of course, we should have been on this back in the spring.
Oh,
One of the
'cause I
suggestions,
thought we cut a hole in the wall or something.
Mike said he could take the bottom steps out so you could look in there, but I don't think that wasn't even good enough for the inspector guy. But one of the suggestions that Mike and Judy had was if the old furnace was in tough shape, maybe we should put in a new furnace and make it propane or something instead of oil.
Where are you gonna put the tank?
I talked to the woman next door, Janet
Janet
Wells,
Wells.
and I asked her if we could bury the tank like close to the town hall, but on her property, and she said she'd think about it. And then she said, why don't you go to the Whites? And so I talked to Carol White, and she said she'd talk to Scoob and see. She didn't immediately say no. So that was one of my options, was to take a 500-gallon tank, bury it. And it might be easier in the end, and it might be more efficient. Because they were, like, when we were talking about library heaters and all, furnaces, they were all just talking about efficiency. So we might end up saving money in the end, I don't know.
So where's that leave us?
Your hippie
We get,
furnace guy's son, is
yeah,
he still in business, farm?
you want me to try to get a hold of him?
Well, I think so, and
Who?
that, is it permanently?
Permanently, but
Who's
he,
it, Brad?
Huh?
What permanently, what's his name?
Bart. But he doesn't do propane.
No, but I wondered if he could come and just look at it and say,
Okay.
is
Okay.
it potentially gonna quit this
Okay.
year or next or
Okay.
something?
Okay.
And if he does, then we could look the other way toward propane or something.
Maybe we could put a whole bunch of solar panels on town hall,
That'd be nice,
and heat it, hot water, solar hot water.
yeah, mostly in the summer.
Maybe. You wanna know how we could save some good money?
I do know how.
We'll have Rodney dig a ditch from Mariah's furnace.
Just
right
thought
around
about it,
town
you said
hall.
it.
No, that go for
You could
it.
have the municipal furnace.
Let me tell you, we started it a couple days ago.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah.
We have it, Devin has it connected to his phone.
Yeah.
So it will alert him when there's only 2 hours burn time left, and then he'll go put wood
That
in and,
Rings the alarm at Rodney's house.
yeah, Rodney loads the wood in.
All
for me.
Harwood brings a load down.
Yeah, exactly.
Ducks it in
Get it
there.
all figured out.
Yeah,
Sounds good.
my
Yeah,
house
would
is
be-
like 76 degrees. I've been turning all my thermostats up.
Hopefully it's like that next winter too.
I hope so.
But that would be good. We could dig a ditch down the backside and you could just load your furnace more often.
That's fine, as long as the
That-
town
that-
pays for the thermal packs or whatever it is
Yeah.
that we've had to bury. I think that was kind of
Oh,
expensive.
we could do that.
Yeah,
Sure,
free wood from Harwood. You'd be all
Yeah.
set.
exactly.
Rodney filling the furnace.
And I got a note from some woman on Gilly Road. I can't think of her name now. Did anybody else get a note
Yeah, it's
complaining about
Anthony
mess?
Winters.
I don't know.
Complaining about what?
That's who she's complaining about.
Oh.
It's the Jenkins, Heather Jenkins.
here.
She was here.
Oh, I don't know her, yes.
She has called me the last few days asking for all of the information on the Winters property and
Yep.
back taxes and if
She's
they have a
had- she's had
mortgage
enough.
and yeah, all of that.
I didn't get back to her because she didn't leave a
And
phone
her
number.
son is
Is
now
it-
deputy with Orange County.
Oh, that's him? Sean?
No,
Oh, is it Emery?
no, he's the younger one. Might be Jackson.
Yeah, I think so.
Hmm.
What about the policing contract? Because we don't currently have one.
We haven't heard anything from.
I asked her to reach out to her select board. She said, okay, she would. And then I haven't heard anything from her
No.
since.
We have to have her come back.
We better sign the sheriff's one or we won't have anything.
She told me at the fair that I should call her,
Okay.
which I haven't done yet, because I wanted to get input from you guys on what we were actually looking for.
No, we're looking for nothing apparently.
I'm look-
I don't know, what do you say?
well,
People say they want more police presence, but, how do you get that? How much is she gonna? I don't know, it's the whole thing's a big,
mhm.
nobody knows what anybody wants. Number one, we can't jump the budget up,
Not too much.
no matter what we do right now.
Right.
We can't jump it until next year. And which I would think would lock us in with a sheriff until we start doing budgets again, which is gonna be right off.
Yep.
And I don't know, we want $15,000 worth of police presence, we want, I don't know. You know, we bumped up the sheriff saying we got nothing.
They didn't even fulfill it.
But do we tell her we want $15,000? Can she do that?
Right.
With her present police force,
Right.
or will she have to go to
Right.
40,000 so she can buy another car and
Right.
hire another officer?
Bump her to a different level.
That's what bothers me. I mean,
Yep.
Can we get Loretta back to our next meeting and just say, this is our budget? We're already through what, 3 months of the fiscal year or
Yeah.
something like
In
that.
there, yeah.
What would we
Yeah,
see?
we
What would
could-
we see for this budget?
we could do that,
Let's do that.
but I think,
Then if
You
she's
know.
like, I can't do it, I need at least 25,000, then I think.
Right.
Then we
Right.
go back. to
well,
the
that's what's bothering me. I mean, even if she doesn't want to talk to Selectboard, she came up with $50,000 or something. Well, we can't
Right. That's
do
not
that.
even a question. But if she's like, I can give you so much for your budget from
But if we said we got,
3/4 of a budget year.
if we got
Right.
$10,000 and we'll give, we'll
Right.
give you 3/4 of it, what are we gonna get?
Right. I'd like to ask that question.
Yep.
Okay, it's up to you.
See if she'll come in.
Nothing I like better than sloughing off stuff on the line.
Nice,
She gets paid the big money.
huge dollars over here.
Let's say you have 17 other jobs to make up for. What you
Yeah.
don't make this job.
Unfortunately, I actually don't get anything as the AA. This is volunteer.
Yeah,
Right.
nice. I like that.
Mm,
I like that in their
Do I
personnel.
like it?
Why
I don't
did you bump
Get
up your
paid by
town
somebody
clerk's
else, you-
salary?
What's that?
You get big.
What'd you say?
I said, why did you bump up your town clerk's salary?
I don't know.
She gets community service.
Yeah,
What's that say?
Partial. Partial.
What's it mean?
Partial day, partial, personal, maybe personal.
Punished.
Punished?
A personal day?
I
don't
bet it's
know.
personal.
Yeah.
Personal. That makes
Oh,
sense.
so do you remember if it was Rodney's truck or Thomas's truck that had the antifreeze leak?
Rodney's truck.
Yeah, it's
Because there's so many Hoyts. We better put Rod.
Yes.
Pillar of the furnace.
We need to know these things.
Oh, I apologize,
You
John.
need to be able to tell Davis, like,
That,
number
see that
one,
truck right there?
number two,
Truck number
there you
two,
are.
that's Larry's
There
truck.
goes old
number
number
6
5.
is Thomas.
Yeah.
Oh,
Someone once said they're like, our son's, he loves it when you in the TQ, when you put in like what number the truck is. Like, we should have names for each truck.
like the movie.
Hurricane. Henri and Sam and
Mhm.
Ida.
Do you think the next meeting will be just as big for the trail stuff? Are we,
Probably not.
because we're not doing anything in regards to the trails policy next meeting.
Right.
It'll be in sometime
We
in.
may discuss something about it, but
Okay.
we're not gonna make a decision, I guess.
Okay.
What would happen if we just threw them all up?
People will be upset.
Well, when this started, that would be the furthest thing from my mind.
Right.
But
Some of them like the trail to nowhere.
Right.
As far as just it's access to nowhere, I think is the.
right, but that's, I mean, yes, legally it's the trail of nowhere, but you know, we snow machined up there, jeeped up there,
Yeah.
hunted up there.
Well, and if somebody talked to the Angels and they were like, we're okay with X,
Right,
then it's a trail again.
Right.
So I
Right.
wouldn't necessarily. And we don't know, Cal's not
you know,
10 years old.
Jimmy was pissed off because them guys went flying down through there in April, you
Right.
know, and course, I can remember when Timmy would have done that. We'll bring that up.
That's different. Different back then.
Do you want me to get this room again when we do decide to go forth with a policy or ordinance? Do you think there'll be a lot of discussion again? Or are you not gonna open it up to discussion?
No, I don't think, because if we come up with something, then we're coming up with it, right?
Mhm.
I mean, we've
Right, but
already
then I think-
listened.
Right, we put it on the website, at that public meeting, I can see it being like this, but
Okay.
that would be the only time maybe.
Right. Because we've listened to all stuff,
Mhm.
and so we're gonna make a decision, then we have our 60 days, we have our public meeting, then that will be it.
Okay, so when we decide to do the public meeting, I will get this one again. Or the gym, you know, depending on how many people are gonna show
You
up
can
for
always
that.
move in there.
Yeah,
We can rent Fenway Park.
sure.
Good.
What's it called for the health officer? With Betsy and what Jody's gonna do when you can take it off on your taxes.
Write it off.
So should we put something like that? It
That's-
says 400
Yeah,
a year
says-
stipend to spend on supplies and then say,
Betsy
And-
kept track of her mileage and stuff, and then she took that off her taxes, because she said that way she could make some money, or
can you write
get her
something
money
like
back
that?
or something. That's $19 more than I paid for my pickup tires,
What size tire is that?
22.5.
Huh. And I heard just recently the commercial tires are gonna be hard to get this winter.
Really?
Well, that's why Rodney's on top of it.
I told them to buy all they needed to, because it wouldn't make any difference in the budget. That was for a 22-inch tire, $169.
11 and 22.5. And
169?
Band-Aids, are those recaps, so,
Oh, probably, but that doesn't seem like much.
no. No, this one says recap.
Yep.
Those are 229. 12 by
Just make a note there
22.5.
where I write the miles an hour, so put in your own words.
Band-Aid winter
Just
deep,
so people
11 by 22.5, 169.81.
Huh.
Oh,
Then there's 11/24.5. What the hell is 24.5 for?
hmm.
It's got one. That's a big ass tire.
Right, 11 by 24.5. Maybe something like that.
You haven't done an ordinance yet.
No.
How many ordinances do we have? Do you have any idea?
Like 4. maybe.
Really?
Yeah,
Like, what are they? Like, I'm just
Like we have
wondering, right?
I think we have a
Dog.
dog ordinance.
Dog owners.
Yeah,
I think we have, I know we did a mailbox policy last winter. I think we did a,
as a policy. though, right?
yeah, I don't, we might not even have 4 ordinances. We might have like 2.
And they may be essentially in connection.
Yeah.
With the state, like because of dog licenses.
Yeah.
Because I was just thinking, like the dog ordinance, when you're in violation of it, we call up Vermont State Police,
Right.
don't we?
Yeah.
And I would think this would be just the same. It's not, we don't want John and Cheverita to arrest people. We just want, you would just say like, you would,
I do
probably
not-
nothing